What's going on, guys? If you're watching this, I hope you had a good weekend. In this video, we're going to be importing this room from the last video into our game. Then we're going to be adding these shadows in the creases along the walls. And then finally, we're going to be adding this animated shadow that covers the border of the room. If you guys are enjoying the series so far, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And yeah. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is inside of the room that we made in the last video, we need to export this. So if you didn't follow the last video, you can download this. I'm going to post this in the description of the video for free. You can just download it. You don't have to actually follow the last video if you don't want to. And just click File at the top left and then Export FBX. And then just name it something. So I'm going to name my room 57 and then change it to FBX unit scale. Negative Z, yeah, negative Z forward, Y up. Just click export. And then after you're done that, inside of Unity, you should create a room folder. So I've already created a room folder here. I'm going to go ahead and create another one. We'll call this room 1 tutorial. And then you can take that FBX file that you just exported and just drag it into your game. All right, so after you're done dragging this into your game, you can drag it right into your rooms folder. We're just going to click on it and rename it to 11. So our change room algorithm still works. And then we're going to right click it and click prefab unpack. Then we're going to go into the folder and we're going to right click and we're going to create an empty and we're going to call this doors. And then on this doors folder or game object, we're going to create another empty game object. And we're going to call this top door. And we're just going to take the armature and the door inner and we're going to drag them inside of the top door. Then we're going to take this top door and press Control D to duplicate it. And it looks like the origin's in the wrong spot. I'm not going to bother fixing that because I just don't have the time. So rotate it 90 degrees on the Y-axis. This would only really matter if you're moving your game object, but if you're not moving it, it doesn't matter. So as long as the animation works, you're not going to ever be moving this door, so the origin doesn't really. We should probably fix it, but I don't have time. So let's just rename this to right door, and then we can press Control D again, and we can rotate this to negative 90, and we'll just put this in front of this door, and we'll call this left door. And then lastly, we can duplicate this again and rotate it 180 degrees. And we'll call this bottom door. Okay, so now we need to make materials for the walls and the floor. So if you right click at the bottom, you can click create material. And we're just going to call this wall material. We're going to be using the same material for both the walls and the floor. The floor is kind of like a write-off. The topology is really bad. You can see there's like holes in it. This isn't going to be the final floor. This is the last video was more of like a wall video. I applied a texture to the floor using the same method with a picture, and it didn't do it very well. So I don't have time to fix it today. I will be fixing that later. But yeah, so after you've made that, you can drag the wall material onto the wall and the floor. And what we want to do is if you right click at the bottom, we can create a shader graph. This is going to be a URP lit shader graph, and we can just call this wall shader. And then in the wall material, we can click on this drop down in the top right and just type in wall and then just choose the wall shader. And then we want to double click on the shader so we can start editing it. So if you right click in the open space in the shader, we can create a Fresnel effect. And then we can right click again and create a gradient effect. And then the gradient can go into a sample gradient. And the Fresnel effect will go into the time slot of the sample gradient. And then we can drag this to the base color. And then we'll save it and you should be able to see a preview update. So you can see this just kind of looks the same. It's still just like white. So what we want to do is we want to change this gradient to be what we want, right? So if we click on this far left key, we'll just make this black. And then right in the middle, this should be like a whitish, like not all the way white, but a lot brighter. And then this can be just like a little bit darker. And then this can be a little bit darker as well. And then let's save this. Okay, so if you've done this right, you can see this really adds a lot to the way the rocks look in the game. So like if you look at the rocks, they're kind of like glowy and cartoony now. They've got like this shiny looking outline. It makes them look kind of realistic. This, again, the floor has these lines going on it, so don't pay attention to the floor. Actually, we're just going to change the floor back to lit shader for now. And we're just going to leave the floor alone the way that it is. So yeah, so that looks pretty cool. And then we need to add a material to the doors. So you can just create this however you want. I'm just going to create a material. I'll call this door frame material. And we can drag this onto all of the door frames. And then you really just need to pick whatever color you want. I'm just going to turn off shadows. We're not going to be using shadows from the actual game. We're going to be making our own shadows. Turn up the metallic map a little bit so that it's like a little bit more shiny. And then you can change it away from white if you want to. Maybe like this brown color looks really good to me. It doesn't matter, right? And then we need the door inner material. So let's create another material and we'll call this door inner. And again, same process. You just have to drag it onto the door inners. And again, we're just going to turn off the shadows and turn up the metallic a little bit. In fact, you could turn it like pretty much all the way up. And you can play with the smoothness if you want. Let's just leave that. And maybe make this like darker brown. Or white. White is fine. This looks good. Okay, so now that we're done that, we're going to create the shadows that go on the floor. So all the shadows are quads. So if you right click on the room 11 here, you can create a 3D object. It's going to be a quad. And we're just going to make this really large. So let's just drag this into the middle for right now. And let's make sure that it's facing the correct direction. So it's facing this way. So we need to rotate this 90 on the x-axis so it's facing upwards. And then we need to create a material. And we're going to call this shadow material. And we'll just drag the shadow material right onto that quad so we can see it because it's blending in with the ground because the lit material is the exact same by default. And then we're going to turn the metallic up to full for now. And we're just going to move this quad to the top of the room. And we'll move it down so it's like on the ground level. And then we're going to move it to the center. And then we're going to stretch it so that it goes the entire length of the room. And we're going to stretch it a little bit this way as well. So you just need to make this the size that you want your shadow to be, right? So then on the left here, we can rename this to shadow. And then we're going to right click at the bottom and we're going to create a shader. Again, it's a lit shader graph. And we're just going to call this shadow shader. And then the same kind of deal where we take the shadow material in the shader thing in the top right. We're just going to type in shadow. And let's drag it and oh, you can't drag it. Let's rename this because I already have a shadow shader, so I don't know which one is which. So I'm just going to call mine shadow shader. You're not going to have to do this, obviously, because you won't have it, but shadow shader 1. Great. And if you double click on this, we can move it over the same way we did before. And you can see that the shadow shader is now pretty much invisible with the floor because it's the default color again. So we're going to turn the metallic up to full. And then we're going to open this graph inspector thing on the right. And we're just going to turn off casting and receiving shadows. We're going to change the surface type to transparent. And then we're going to remove preserve specular lighting and then click save. So if you've done this right, it should kind of look shiny now. We don't really want it like that. So change the base color to black. And then we want to right click in the open space and create a node. This is going to be the UV node. We're going to drag the UV node into a swizzle node. And I think the swizzle can just be, it's either Y or X. I don't know. Let's just try it with X first. And then we're going to put this into a smooth step. And then a 1- node. And then we're going to drag that into the alpha. So if you look at this, the dark parts are, the white parts are going to be transparent. And the dark parts are going to be, it's the opposite. The white parts are going to be visible. The dark parts are going to be transparent. So if we save this, you can see that this is backwards. So there's 2 ways to fix this. You can either rotate the object or you can just get rid of the 1-. You don't actually need that. And then just drag this a little bit closer. And there we go. So we kind of have the shadow effect. We just need to drag it out a little bit so that the dark part is actually visible. So we want it right against the wall. The other thing you could do to do this is in a previous video, we drew an X on the wall using the VFX graph with decals. You could put a decal on the ground and you could use the wall as the mesh for your decal and then project it downwards onto the ground and it would actually outline the rocks. We're not going to do that. That's a lot of work, and I I'm just, maybe in a later time I'll actually do that and I'll just export the result, but that'll be a lot more complicated. We're not going to do that right now. So this is how we make this shadow that's on the edge. So then you just have to duplicate it 4 times. So if you press Control D, you can move it down. Let me just actually pin this to the top and we'll go back into this. So you can rotate this 90 degrees and then just drag it over to the wall here. If it's not taking up the entire wall, just go into the scale and just extend it. The UV, it doesn't matter about the tiling because it's the same all the way across. So you can move it out or move it in or whatever, and just try to get it perfectly aligned with the wall so that the darkest part is visible as well. Okay, and then we just want to duplicate this again. So, Control D to duplicate, and then -90 in the Y. And then you could drag it to this wall. And then you can duplicate this one as well. Drag it down here, and then 180. Okay, so this is how I made the shadows on the walls. I think this looks really, really good. And you could put the wall material on the ground or put whatever material you want on the ground for right now. But I think this looks really good. If you do want the shadow to be stronger, you can play with the smooth step values. So like if you turn the edge to 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, etc., it will make that go over. If you don't want, so if you want it to like grow based on this still, but not be moved over, but you want it to be darker, you could put this into a multiply node and you could multiply this. And the higher the number is, the more pronounced the amount will be. So like if we put this to the alpha and we save it, you'll be able to see that it gets, okay, 5 is obviously way too much, but you get the point. You can multiply it, and the more you multiply it by, the more pronounced the values will be. So that's pretty much it for the shadow that's on the ground. So let's save this again. Okay, so now we're going to make the animated shader that's on the top, like the shadow that like goes around the border of the room. So let's just take one of these shadows and we'll duplicate it and we'll just kind of move it towards the middle of the room for now. And we're just going to right click at the bottom and we're going to create a new material and we'll call this animated shadow. And then we're going to duplicate our shadow shader and we can just call this animated shadow shader. It's the same deal as before. Click on this material, type in animated, and set the shader to be that. And then we can drag this material onto our shadow. So let's just make sure we have the right shadow here. Let's rename this to animated shadow. Okay, great. And then we're just going to drag the material onto it. So right there. And then we need to double click on the animated shadow shader and we're just going to drag this out so we can start editing it. Okay, so we're starting with the same shader that we have for our shadow, but we want it to be animated. So we're going to use 3 different types of noise to separate the shadow, okay? So if you right click, you can click create node and just type in the word noise. And we're going to create a simple noise, a gradient noise, and a Voronoi noise. So for these, because it's not the same all the way across, we don't want them to appear stretched because we've really stretched this a lot. So if you look at the scale, it's 37 times larger than it normally is, right? So if you just plug the UV into this, it's going to be really stretched. So what we want to do is we want to create a tiling and offset node. And we want to set the X to 5 and the Y to 37.839 or whatever your Y is, right? So just make it the same as, and then we want to create a time node to the left of this. And then we want to multiply the time node by a vector 2. And then we want to make this negative 0.2 on the y-axis, and we're going to drag this into the offset. So the reason we're using a vector 2 is because you can make it scroll up and down on left and right with the multiply. So then we're going to put this into the UVs of all 3 of these things. Okay, and we're going to greatly increase this. So 25 for the cell density of the Voronoi. And then I think probably like 5 for the gradient noise, and then maybe like 100 for the simple noise. And then we want to put all of these into a multiply node. So 3 separate multiplies. And then we can take the output of the smooth step and multiply each of them by this, like this. And then we just need to drag all of this over, and we just want to add all of these together. So you can just make an add node here, drag this with this, and then you could do another add node here, and then drag this into this. So then we want to put all of this into the alpha, and then click save. So if you've done this correctly, you should see that the noise is moving the wrong direction. We want it to be coming out towards the center, not like going left to right. So we just need to go over here where we have this vector 2, and instead of having it -2 in the y-axis, let's try -0.2 in the x-axis. So this is again the wrong direction, so we just want to do 0 here and 0.2 in the x-axis. There we go. And you could even make that a little bit more. Let's try 1. There we go. That's pretty cool. And I think we want to also add the normal gradient back to it as well. So let's just click, put another add node here and do this. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so we have all these noises going together, and they're just being added together and put into the alpha. So we can now drag this up, because it's going to be on top, obviously, right? And we'll just drag it over to the edge. And this is how you can get that faded effect. Now, if you have to stretch this, you need to change the tiling in here, right? So if you change the size of this to make it work better, you need to change it here as well. So instead of using 5, we should be using 5.2. And yeah, we are going to have to, yeah, because it doesn't even make it all the way. So let's make the Y bigger. And then we'll just change this to 57.59 to match that. Okay, so then you can save this, and then we're just going to drag this to the top. We'll pin it at the top here. And then we want to duplicate this 4 times the same way that we did before. So if we could take this animated shadow, and we'll just name it top so that later when we go to move these, we don't get confused. We can duplicate it, rotate it 180 degrees, and then we'll just drag it all the way to the bottom, like that. And then we can call this one animated shadow bottom. And then we can Control D to duplicate again, rotate it to 90 degrees, and then we'll bring it over to this wall like this. And then we'll name this animated shadow right. And then lastly, we can duplicate this again. Oops, Control D to duplicate, and bring it over to this side and rotate it to -90. And we'll drag it in here. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's all I did to make this so far. Like I said, I'm going to be changing the ground around, but that's pretty much it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. If there's anything specific you would like to see content-wise, you can definitely leave a comment, and I'm usually pretty good about replying to the comments. You're also welcome to join my Discord if you want to. There's a link for that in the description. But yeah, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.